In previous episodes, I detailed Austria-Hungary's participation in World War I, talking about the dual monarchy's role in the conflict, along with videos on the k.u.k. Kriegsmarine and the country's eventual demise. The Imperial and Royal Aviation troops are yet to be mentioned, but this video finally plugs that gap. We will see how the fledgling Air Force was expanded and maintained during the war, and how it was finally overwhelmed and broken into pieces along with its homeland. More than 20 years prior to the Great War, in 1893, the air service was established with observation balloons. In 1912, it was then reorganized by Major Emil Uzelatz, who remained in command until the end of the war. At the outbreak of hostilities, Austria-Hungary had 10 observation balloons, 85 pilots, and 39 aircraft. The latter were mostly unarmed reconnaissance monoplanes and biplanes, such as the Ettrich Taube, the Löhner B-1 and B-2, the Lloyd C-1, and the Hansa-Brandenburg B-1, which was produced in Germany. Naval aviation was also given attention. The Löhner E series was followed by the L series, earning quite a reputation after successful sorties against installations, ships, and submarines. Multiple companies were contracted to produce aircraft, but there was a shortage of raw materials and skilled labor. In most cases, production was slow due to a lack of assembly lines, but technological innovation also posed problems, which meant that early fighters lacked the gun synchronization gear that would have allowed firing through the propeller. There were also 4 airships available, but one of them was destroyed in 1914 in a collision with a French-made recon plane, and the program was abandoned. The purchase of Zeppelin airships was given some thought, but it never materialized. Organization was three-level. Newly produced aircraft were delivered to one of the 5 Fliegerarsenal (FLARS) group for acceptance. One of these groups was in Germany to accept German planes. They were then forwarded to Fliegeretappenpark (FLAPs) that supplied the aviation units at each front and also repaired heavily damaged aircraft. At the same level, Fliegerersatzkompanies (FLEX) trained and supplied air and maintenance crews, but also set up newly created units. Finally, there were the frontline units, the Flieger companies, or FLICs, with 10 pilots each, often severely undermanned. By 1917, these squadrons had a letter suffix to denote their role, from short and long-range recon to fighter, ground support, and bomber units. The original markings, bright red and white bands, were only retained on the tail and the wingtips. Then, in 1916, the German Black Cross was adopted instead. Already in August 1914, Löhner flying boats of the k.u.k. Seeflieger Corps photographed artillery positions in Montenegro, a first in this war. At that time, air combat consisted of ramming each other, often resulting in a fatal crash for both parties, as it happened in September when a Russian recon plane crashed into an Albatros B-2, destroying both planes. The Luftfahrttruppen quickly expanded, reaching 147 operational aircraft in 14 flicks by the end of the year, providing vital information to the army on enemy positions and important developments. More Aviatik B-1 and B-2 recon planes were acquired from the company's Austro-Hungarian subsidiary, followed by German models. By early 1915, 125 different prototypes were tested, few making it to production runs. One of these was the Hansa-Brandenburg B-1, of which 86 were ordered. Italy's entry to the war opened up yet another front, so demand for aircraft grew further. Existing models were improved, new programs were started, sometimes resulting in a dead end, such as the Knoller C recon airplane or the ÖFAG G flying boat, but more German aircraft like the Fokker B-1 and the Aviatik C-1 were purchased, while UFAG in Budapest started producing the Brandenburg C-1, an armed biplane. Successes were also achieved. On the 16th of September, L-132 and L-135 over Cattaro spotted the French submarine Foucault and forced the crew to abandon it, capturing 2 officers. This was the first kill of a submarine by aircraft. However, in the same month, an airplane was lost in Serbia to ground fire, another first in this war. The list of firsts kept growing, as in November, Austrian planes bombed retreating Serbian columns in Kosovo. 1916 brought with it new fighter models and an expansion program with the objective of reaching 48 squadrons, although only 37 were established by the end of the year. While the Knoller B-1 and C-1 were plagued by design issues, the Aviatik B-3 and the Fokker B-2 recon planes arrived in large numbers, followed by the Austrian Aviatik C-1, the Hansa-Brandenburg C-1, and the Lloyd C-3 and C-4, most of which came with a single machine gun for the observer. The first true fighter came next, with a single unsynchronized Schwarzlose machine gun under the name Hansa-Brandenburg D-1. With more than 120 delivered, this remained the standard fighter in Austro-Hungarian units until mid-1917. The introduction of fighters did not change the unspoken rules of aerial combat. A Hungarian pilot, Antal Bocsai, explained in a 1980s interview that when he saw that his opponent had an issue with his machine gun, he would simply wave and fly away. The following day, enemy aircraft would drop a small package with a message at his airfield, thanking him for his gentlemanly conduct. One of these opponents was the Italian poet Gabriele D'Annunzio, who would become famous after the war. The German ally delivered more planes, such as the Fokker E-3, but license production of the Albatros D-2 and D-3 fighters also commenced, with some synchronization issues with the Schwarzlose machine guns. The 1917 expansion program was fulfilled, 31 new units were set up to reach 68 squadrons in total, but Entente superiority in numbers became very clear by the second half of the year, as more British and French units were moved to Italy, the only remaining major theater of war. Shortages of coal and other supplies hampered production efforts, but Austria-Hungary did not give up. While the Navy received its new Hansa-Brandenburg CC and W-13 float planes, production of the Löhner flying boats continued, and the first domestic single-seat fighter with synchronized twin machine guns was also introduced. This was the Aviatik Berg D-1, not to be confused with the German model, with good flying characteristics and some initial production issues. Overall, almost 700 samples were delivered. They were used mainly as escorts, as pilots preferred the Albatros D-3 for air superiority missions. At the same time, Phoenix started the delivery of its own D-1 escort fighter, which was based on the original Hansa-Brandenburg D-1, but with synchronized twin machine guns. For bombing sorties, the Hansa-Brandenburg G-1 was tested, but results were unfavorable due to vibration issues, especially when compared to the German Gotha G4, which performed much better. In the last year of the war, production increased again, but the plan to reach 100 squadrons with 1,000 pilots could not be met. Overall strength peaked at 77 flicks and 550 planes, but only 16 units were fighter squadrons, and the withdrawal of German planes to the Western Front further worsened the situation. In late October, when around 400 Entente planes supported the Italian offensive, only 29 aircraft could be scrambled to face them. Interestingly, most aces seem to serve in Fleet 41J, the first dedicated fighter squadron, under the command of Austria's leading ace, Godwin Brumowski. Members included Frank Linke-Crawford, Ferenc Grézer, Károly Kasala, and Kurt Gruber. Other Hungarian pilots, such as István Fejes and József Kiss, also became aces. Wartime production reached 5,000 airframes, and 4,000 engines. By comparison, Italy built about 18,000 planes, although they could rely on large-scale Entente assistance. Losses amounted to 20% of naval flyers killed in action or accidents, and 38% of army aviators. The end came on the 3rd of November 1918, when the local armistice on the Italian front resulted in a hasty retreat and the capturing of tens of thousands of soldiers on the ground, which the Italian army used to make up for wartime failures. Remaining aircraft were used in subsequent conflicts with some success.